And what you're seeing is it works. Rather than throwing our panties at Kevin McCarthy as other conservatives wanted to do, so far, he fought 2 of the items we wanted. Well, 1.5 on the NDAA. They got out the vaccine mandate in the military. Should have been done a year ago. And this demonstrates how easy it could have been to do it a year ago. And then now, finally, at least publicly, half-heartedly, he is saying, I want the budget bill to be kicked into next year, not an omnibus. So that's progress. But that's progress we wouldn't have gotten and will not continue to get unless we hold their feet to the fire. Not like, oh, we're trying to help you defeat the Democrats, but the Democrats, no. This is what we expect. This is what we demand. We call the balls and strikes at a federal level, most importantly in the state level, on the right people, the right action items. That's what we're all about here. Everything else is just noise. But instead, we have all these talk show hosts and influencers that have all this money that are all about these private little, connections and relationships. Oh, and now I got a relationship with Kevin McCarthy. Oh, I got a relationship with Trump. I have to stand down on this issue. I have to change my long-standing views on this to accommodate this guy. Oh, whoops, my son works for this guy in GOP leadership, so I guess I can't say anything anymore. Not only that, I'm going to lambaste everyone else who says what I said until 3 minutes ago. That's what it is. And the worst thing, folks, is when you have these frauds. See, Boehner had an open, hostile relationship with the conservative media. Whereas McCarthy, the fact that all these guys are kissing his rear end should scare you, because that means that headed forward on the issues, they won't hold his feet to the fire. They'll apologize for him. They'll carry his water, and they'll attack anyone who is trying to hold his feet to the fire. We're all kind of resigned that, yeah, you're probably gonna wind up with him. But without having a fight over and extracting demands from him, you're not going to get any change. And the change in behavior we got until now, even on these issues, were only due to people like Andy Biggs, who's now being attacked bizarrely. By the way, just want to get one thing out of the way. One of the things that Andy Biggs is being attacked for is that I think he might have said this publicly, that he voted for Tom Emmer as whip for the number 3 position. But the reason he did that is kind of like the reason why I say, half tongue-in-cheek, I support Lisa Murkowski for president. The other option was Jim Banks. Jim Banks is the new Steve Scalise. He's a snake. He pretends to be a conservative, has relationships with conservatives. Someone on his staff is the son of a very prominent conservative talker and voice. And he would be literally the conduit for leadership to get conservatives to stand down. I had this problem all along in the administration when Trump was president. There were 2 types of friends of mine that would go into the Trump administration. There were those that were like, yeah, Daniel, this is stupid, but like, yeah, whatevs. And then there were those that got all serious about it because it was personal to them. And rather than them holding the line, they served as an ambassador to get conservatives to stand down, holding their feet to the fire. And that's what happens when you have people like Jim Banks. Everyone knows Andy Biggs doesn't support Tom Emmer, but the idea was you would wind up with the same outcome, so let's just make it blatantly so Tom Emmer doesn't have that relationship to get us to stand down. It was a strategic move, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. Andy Biggs is not a secret rhino. He has 100% CR Liberty score. He was one of the few that voted against the original First Step Act, the jailbreak bill that almost every conservative was coaxed into voting for because Trump bought into that crap. Kevin McCarthy is a 52 rating. Give me a break. Then there's this whole business with the Convention of the States, which requires its own show. Look, I support it, but I mean, we'll be dead by the time we get 34 and then 38 states to agree to anything. And then even the things that we're doing are small potatoes and don't speak to the Fourth Reich issues. I disagree fundamentally with the fact that you need 38 states to allow 1 or 2 or 10 or 15 conservative states on their own to go their own way. They cannot violate the Constitution, and then we have to go through that arduous process that will take 100 years in order to save ourselves. We don't have time for that. I'm not opposed to it, and I support it, but there are legitimate people that, whether you agree with their arguments or not, and I tend to disagree with their arguments, but in the eyes of kind of the Eagle Forum movement, Phyllis Schlafly, was Phyllis Schlafly a rhino? No, but she opposed the Convention of the States. I'm not going to tear people down like Andy Biggs, who opposed the Convention of the States. That has nothing to do with this. So somehow we have to support McCarthy and oppose the people that are fighting for us on the issues that matter at the time they matter, in the way they matter, because they weren't a fan of the Convention of the States. What the hell does that have to do with anything? What, and Kevin McCarthy is such a supporter of it? It's just so random. By the way, Thomas Massie violently opposes the Convention of the States. Is he a rhino? Should I disown him and support Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell now? The reality is we all have certain projects, and that's fine. But then certain things happen that make it that I have a lot of projects I push, but now that we're in the Fourth Reich, they're too little too late, and I had to update some of my ideas because they just don't speak to the time, and that's fine. But I'm not going to create needless division among the few conservatives we have in legislatures. The reality is, some of the if you take the most conservative guys that are fighting for medical freedom, fighting for the issues that matter, a third of them support the Convention of States, a third of them oppose it, a third of them are indifferent. I'm not going to create a needless division over that at this point, even while I still support the idea. We need a lowercase Convention of the States with a lowercase c, meaning not necessarily Article 5, but the idea that the solution is not in Washington, that you work within the states, work with state interposition. But that shouldn't require 38 states. We need a sanctuary state right now. One state could do that. The more, the better. But with this, you're nothing unless you get 34 and then 38, which the state legislative elections have shown will never get there this past term. States like Nevada and New Mexico that we needed, they gerrymandered into oblivion. You're never going to get the majorities there. And only like 1 in 1,000 Democrats has ever voted for it out of the 20 or so states that voted for it. Whatever. I mean, that requires an entire show in and of itself. I don't want to get caught on that. But it's just so random. Up is down and down is up. So, our strongest votes in the history of this generation, they're the rhinos. If they oppose Kevin McCarthy, what is that? You want to have a different strategic vision, that's fine. But to rip anyone who doesn't support the vaccines, and then rip anyone who doesn't support Ukraine, and then rip anyone who doesn't support Kevin McCarthy is just bizarre. You're basically destroying your best people. I mean, who does? I mean, I'm trying to think. If you add up, okay, which elected officials support McCarthy, support Zelensky, and thought the shots were a great idea? Well, I guess that pretty much leaves you with Kevin McCarthy types. Okay, Elise Stefanik, she's now a hero. I just don't understand this. But, we're going to do what we do. People will disagree in strategy, family disagreements, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to lambast them in the same way they lambast us, and get that personal, which it should never get that personal. Sometimes you just have to be strategic. Like Idaho and Montana are two states where kind of the Phyllis Schlafly component seems to have a lot of support, and those are two of the reddest states that have not yet adopted Convention of the States. I'm not going to tear them down because the reality is some of those people are the ones that are going to help us with the interposition right now. If states like Idaho and Montana did what needs to be done right now on interposition, on medical freedom, on everything, you would make yourselves free of the federal morass without having to get the blue states to agree with you. Which I don't agree that we need to get them. I disagree with the Birchers and the Phyllis Schlafly crowd that somehow the Convention of the States will be used as a tool for bad. I just think it's the opposite. It's just not enough. It's too little, too late. And also, we just literally don't have enough states that we can ever get the control of the legislature based on the intractable partisan divide. See, my whole plan presupposes that half the country is lost and the federal government's lost. I agree the solution's outside of Washington, but not that the solution's outside of Washington to somehow fix Washington. I don't think you're ever going to fix it, and I think those states need to do their own thing. So I'm not going to destroy relationships with the people we need to give us that life jacket, that life vest to stop us from drowning in the Fourth Reich because they don't support that long-term solution. I view the Convention of the States as more like, let's say you had a breakaway of 20 to 25 states doing what they want, and you want some sort of stable structure and agreement between them, you kind of use that sort of structure as a plan forward. But right now, we'll be dead. I mean, we need immediate solutions. And I'm just telling you, go down the list of your top people in Congress, in state legislatures that fight for us on the issues that matter. And there's very few of them, and a good number of them oppose Convention of the States. I disagree with their kind of strategy on that, but at the same time, I actually think the time has passed for it. I think it's a 1990s solution, and that's fine. I understand a lot of people have put a lot of money and effort into it, but what do you do when now they're blatantly arresting people? They're blatantly, I mean, you got to have an answer for that. Again, I have a lot more to say on that. It's a lot more nuanced, but my point is to tear down a guy like Andy Biggs, and again, you'd have to apply that to Thomas Massie and other people as well over it, is just stupid. It just makes no sense. You know, I wrote an article. It went viral all over congressional members and staff. I revisited all of the budget bills and debt ceilings that were passed under Trump. It says in Deuteronomy 28:47, you know, when it talks about all the curses that will befall Israel for joining in with idolatry and sin, all of this will befall you, quote, because you did not serve the Lord, your God, with happiness and with gladness of heart when you had an abundance of everything. And that's what it was. We had that trifecta control. Could you imagine the political capital with Trump's surprise victory? And they had the House and the Senate with it. And yet, every budget not only failed to cut the Fourth Reich bureaucracies, CDC and the FBI and all this stuff, EPA, it dramatically grew the spending levels over Obama's baseline. Every one. Kevin McCarthy was majority leader, floor leader during all of that. And he passed, and I come with all the receipts, and then I link to a column I wrote at the time on every one of them. I fought every budget battle since 2010. I have a column to go with it, giving the broader background on it and the gravity of it at the time and how perfidious it was, that it funded everything that was horrible and didn't fund things like the border wall at the time it mattered when they had the power. McCarthy did that to us. Every budget bill that he passed had more Democrat support than Republican support. So they tell us, Daniel, if you don't support him, you're helping the Democrats somehow. This is the line. They work with the Democrats with a sodomist-like relationship. They have gay sex with them every second, sometimes literally. You should see what goes on there. And then they're like, if you don't support them, you're helping the Democrats. What are you talking about? It's time to say never rhino. Never rhino. Until we do, we have no leverage over them. And then hold them accountable. You have a speaker fight, you have a primary fight, and then you have the legislative fights, and you focus on them, you name names. You name bills, you popularize it. That's what a movement of substance does. You treat them like the slave, not us like the slave, not them like the master. That's the middle ground between being slavishly devoted to the GOP and just instantaneously starting a new party that doesn't currently exist. And I keep saying that there's a middle ground there. So anyway, my article is widely believed to be one of the reasons Kevin McCarthy finally said, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't pass an omnibus. Let us deal with it as a GOP majority and rewrite the budget. Thanks to the work we did. So a lot of them will be like, what are you talking about? See, Kevin McCarthy's much better than McConnell. He's now arguing with him. Yeah, only because we finally forced it. No thanks to you. This is what it is. But that's the point. You have to floor the gas pedal when you have that opportunity. And we don't have the same opportunity, but they do control the House. And we're going to talk with our guest about the type of budget we need to pass, but the type of issues that we need to expend that political capital on and have that budget brinkmanship. Imagine if starting today you actually had a party that said, we will not fund medical fascism, pharma greed, cutting the balls off of children, a border invasion, teaching our children that we're racist, FBI arresting political opponents and surveilling the surveillance state, the biomedical state, and you message that to the public. That's the smart play, as opposed to talking about Social Security. Again, we'll talk about that with Russ Vought coming up. But you hold them on a short leash. But I wanted people to understand how McCarthy and that entire era of leadership, how they screwed us. We are in the position we're in today because those bureaucracies were doubled in funding under Trump's trifecta. And by the way, that doesn't absolve him from the liability of that either. Last time I checked, he had a veto pen, too, that he never used. But, certainly McCarthy was a big part of that. And we're just supposed to ignore that? We're to believe he's going to fight for us with just control of the House when he passed. I want you to understand, Trump's a Nazi, right? That's the Democrat mantra. Trump's a Nazi in their mind. But yet, his budget bills, and that's all that matters, is your budget. Every policy is budget. Every budget bill under Trump's presidency was passed with near unanimous, and sometimes unanimous, Democrat support in one or both chambers. That's astounding. They hated him. Everything about him was horrible, yet they all loved his budgets. They all voted for them. Kevin McCarthy was a part of that. That's why we are where we are today. That when we had that control, when God gave us that abundance, it not only was squandered, it was subverted. All of it. There's no one magic bullet. That's why you can't put an idolatry into one guy, one presidential race, one strategy like Convention of States. It's fine to support it, but it can't be your only thing, especially something that's so long-term when we're going to die by then. Don't let one thing get in the way of a broader vision.